Welcome to the Battle Ready Sermon Podcast with Captain Rob Westwood-Payne.
I want you to close your eyes for a few moments and picture yourself in a crowd of people. It might be that this crowd is on the high street in Maidenhead, or the high street where you work, or wherever you live. Could be on your commute into or out of London. It's the height of rush hour. Could be in a shopping centre. It's the height of rush hour. And the swarm of bodies are pushing past you like a solid mass of humanity wearing 1,000 different faces. Many of the faces that pass you by are expressionless. Others seem to project feelings of frustration, fatigue, and above all, anxiety. That seems to be the lot, the kind of zeitgeist of most people these days. The crowd is so big and crushed around you that it's almost impossible for you to stand still amidst the motion of the masses. You're jostled about, you're pushed around. You feel that they could easily sweep you away, but you hold your ground. Now, if you were like a drone and you could rise above the crowd for a few moments and look around in any direction, you'd see what appears to be an endless river of people. Ask yourself, what are you feeling right now in the middle of that crowd? You could feel overwhelmed just by the sheer numbers of people. Perhaps you feel a bit threatened because you're closed in with people all around you. Maybe you're anxious to get away from the crowd. If you're not accustomed to being in a big crowd, then suddenly finding yourself in the middle of one can be downright intimidating. But now ask yourself the question: if Jesus was in your place in the middle of this crowd, how would Jesus feel? You can open your eyes again, but keep that picture in your mind's eye for a few moments. As we've been talking through our big conversation since the beginning of the year, two of the biggest questions that we're asking each other is, who are we supposed to be in the 21st century? Who is the Salvation Army supposed to be? Who is Maidenhead Corps supposed to be in the 21st century? And what are we supposed to be doing? What are we supposed to be doing? Now, we've already come up with lots of answers about that, and we're going to have to sift through them over the next few months and really try to discern what God is asking us to do. But I am sure that at least one leg of that stool, if you remember back to General John Gowan's Save Souls, Grow Saints and Serve Suffering Humanity, one of those legs of our stools is going to be serving suffering humanity. And you have just brought to mind a crowd of suffering humanity. That's definitely what we are supposed to be doing in this 21st century. Victor Shepherd, who's a pastor and theology professor, tells this story. He says, years ago in my seminary course with Dr. James Wilkes, a Toronto psychiatrist, one student lamented that in this age of agnosticism and secularism, we're no longer sure of the church's vocation. You've heard that, haven't you? Between us and in the Salvation Army and across churches, what is it that we're supposed to be doing? Maybe we've lost our vocation. I always remember General Linda Bond. She often used to say, I hope we've got over this argument, this discussion about who the Salvation Army is supposed to be. But it is a question that we've been asking ourselves. And Wilkes stared at the student for the longest time as if the student were half deranged. And then he remarked this: are you telling me that you can have a suffering human being in front of you and you don't know what the church's vocation is? Let me say that again. Are you telling me that you can have a suffering human being in front of you and you don't know what the church's vocation is? Victor Shepherd goes on to say There is a low-grade suffering that is simply part of the human condition. It never goes away. There's also high-grade suffering, intense pain that can come upon us at any time for any reason and remain with us for any length of time. And to be sure, professional expertise is often needed for people unwell in both respects. But even as professional expertise is called for, we should never think that the church's ministry isn't. While there is one suffering human being in our community, the church has a ministry. The church has a ministry. And to answer that question, how would Jesus have felt if he was in your position in that crowd that you imagined? We go back to the verses that we read from Matthew chapter 9 earlier, and we get the answer. Verse 36 says, when Jesus looked out over the crowds, his heart broke. So confused and aimless they were, like sheep with no shepherd. Jesus looked out over the crowds, saw the suffering humanity, and his heart broke for them, and he was reminded once again that this was his ministry. And Jesus went beyond his family and friends, those who were like him, and he reached out to the masses with his broken heart. The great crowds of people who were confused and aimless. They may have been a bit weird. They may have been odd. I imagine that if you were someone who was suffering from leprosy and you were cast out of your society and made to go and live in the caves out in the desert, that probably made you a bit odd. They may have been on the very margins of society. But Jesus doesn't laugh at them. He doesn't reject them. He doesn't turn away from them or back off from them. His heart breaks for them. And in this chapter, Matthew chapter 9, if you've got your Bibles, you might want to have a look at it. If you haven't got your Bible, bring it next week. Have a look at it when you get home. But in this chapter 9, we have kind of like a mini summary of Jesus reaching out with his broken heart to the masses and helping them and healing them. So in this one chapter, Matthew chapter 9, we have Jesus restoring a paralyzed man from sickness after his friends brought him to Jesus on a mat. And Jesus doesn't only heal him and help him to walk again, but he forgives this man his sins, bringing peace to his conscience. In this chapter, Jesus restores a broken home by raising Jairus' daughter from the dead. He restores the hope of a woman who was hemorrhaging and was therefore ceremonially unclean and rejected by her community. The doctors couldn't help her. They'd been trying to help her for over 12 years, but Jesus healed her. And Jesus restores broken bodies by healing the sight of 2 blind men and then by ridding a mute man of a demon so that the man could speak again. Just in that one chapter, Jesus reaches out to suffering humanity with his broken heart and heals and helps them. Jesus went beyond his family and friends, beyond the people who were like him, and he reached out to the masses because his heart was broken by the world's pain. We know from his ministry that in all our hurts, he is hurt like we are. He cannot see someone suffering without wanting to ease their pain. His heart was broken by the world's sorrow. So when he sees us upset because of the stress we're under, when he sees us weep for the difficulties that a loved one is in, when he sees us lay a loved one or a friend to rest, his greatest desire is simply to wipe every tear from our eye. His heart was broken by the world's hunger. When he saw a tired and hungry crowd, all he wanted to do was to use his power to feed them. His heart was broken and is broken by the world's loneliness, maybe the biggest scourge on our society today. He reached out to those who were shunned by their communities, those who were cast outside their cities and their towns and their villages, those on the margins of society. The sight of a leper, for example, living that deathly life of loneliness and abandonment, pulled on his heartstrings and caused him to reach out and to heal them. We hear from this verse that his heart was broken by the crowd's confusion and aimlessness. They were longing for God, as everybody longs for God, but their religious leaders had nothing to offer them. They wouldn't give them the guidance and the comfort and the strength that they needed, and as a result, the crowds were tormented, exhausted, led astray. And Jesus longed to just give them the encouragement, the help, the strength, and the comfort that they needed. This is our primary motivation for mission. That our hearts are breaking for the suffering humanity around us, to see the need of those who are dying outside of the kingdom. So when we see people harassed by the pressures of modern life, exhausted by the sheer busyness of it all, going nowhere, treading water, unsure of where to go, confused and aimless, led astray by the false ideologies of the world, our hearts should break like Jesus' hearts break, and we should reach out as Jesus reached out. With so many people like this around us, in our communities, wherever we are, in this town, wherever we live, wherever we work, wherever we socialize, we dare not be weakly trying to carry out our mission in our own strength. We dare not be out simply to entertain ourselves in worship. We dare not be untrained in mission. We dare not be unwilling to sacrifice for other people, or feel that we're powerless to share God's story with others, or be prayerless. Like Jesus, we must see the needs of suffering humanity around us and act. If Jesus' heart breaks for the great crowds, then ours should too. His heart breaks for the confused and the aimless, and he comes to them as their shepherd. But those verses from Matthew chapter 9 tell us that not only does he come to the crowd as their shepherd, but he sends out his followers, his disciples, to join in the shepherding and to continue it. That's our mission. That's our mandate. Who are we supposed to be in the 21st century? We're sent out disciples to go and serve suffering humanity. What are we supposed to be doing? Whatever it takes to serve suffering humanity around us. Jesus said to his disciples in verses 37 and 38, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his field." Now, I feel like I need to issue a public service announcement this morning. Okay, a kind of a warning. If you really and truly pray that prayer, pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into the field. You know what often happens? Jesus tells you you're the answer to your own prayer. That's what the people on Exploring Leadership Day discovered yesterday. We may all say, we need more leaders in the Salvation Army. And Jesus will sometimes say to us, well, then you're the answer to that prayer. We may need more workers in the Salvation Army to go out into the fields. Well, you may well be the answer to that prayer. Jesus expects us to do our part in answering that prayer. We must be out working in the field. Why? Because the harvest is great. The needs are great. We all need to be out working in the fields. Now, apart from Peter Kidney, I guess that most of us haven't been involved in harvesting. Anybody been involved in farming, harvesting, apart from Peter? But we know a little bit about it, don't we? We know enough to know what harvesting is about. And we do know that harvest is a community affair when it comes to it. It takes more than a couple of people running a farm to run all the machinery and the lorries and everything else that's needed to bring in the harvest. Someone has to milk the animals, someone has to feed the animals, somebody has to change the irrigation, somebody has to cultivate the crops, somebody has to bale the hay, and all the other work that we can think of that goes on a farm, particularly over harvest time. Someone else has to prepare big and hearty meals that are brought to the field to be eaten quickly while the machinery and the lorries are refueled. Somebody has to work at the grain elevator to receive the grain and then ship it to market. There are business people around who are ready to make sure that repairs are available immediately, fuel is delivered on time, and welding and other repairs and all sorts of other things can be done to keep things going. Family members may come out from the city or wherever they've moved away from to help, and grandchildren are enlisted to enjoy the family rituals. Everyone has a job to do, and they're all important to support the ultimate goal of bringing in the harvest. So when Jesus says the harvest is great, but the workers are few, our hearts should stop in their tracks. And we should realize he's talking about us. He's talking about us. Out there in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, our colleges, our workplaces, in our social places, on our streets, there is a beautiful crop ready to be brought into Jesus. And we need to be out there doing it. We should sense immediately the urgency in Jesus' voice about the call for workers. We only have to look at our society to see that it appears to be slowly sliding into oblivion. More and more people are moving away from God and living lives of confusion and aimlessness. They're experiencing more and more pain. They're disconnected from God, and our heart should break for them. And we must want to help them and show them that we love them. If you think I'm exaggerating, if you're sitting there going, well, I don't think society's really slipping into oblivion. I don't think we're in the dire straits you're suggesting. Well, Pastor Rick Warren has helpfully put together what he calls an alphabet of pain in today's world. I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. Abuse, addictions, aging, anxiety, Alzheimer's, abortion, bullying and cyberbullying, conflict, corruption, chronic pain, churches declining, disasters, discrimination, diseases, disabilities, debt, device dependency, economic and environmental issues, elderly long-term care, extremism, family, disintegration, fatherless generation, grief, gangs, gambling, homelessness, hunger, HIV and AIDS, identity confusion, incivility, injustice, infertility. The jail and prison population is increasing. Killings, the trauma of public killings on our streets, loneliness, long-term care of the elderly, mental illness, mental health, narcissism in our self-absorbed culture, the opioid epidemic, obesity, orphans, poverty, porn, polarization, persecution, privacy loss, quarrelsomeness and quick-temperedness in the age of outrage, racism, refugees, immigration, rudeness, sexual harassment, sexual assault, suicide, stress, the pressure of social media, truth and trust loss, terrorism, trauma, trafficking, sex trafficking, and human trafficking. There are more slaves today in the world than there ever has been. Unemployment, urban issues, violence at home, domestic violence, workplace violence, neighborhood violence, widows, workaholism, work stress, xenophobia, youthquake, 100 million street children in the world right now. 100 million kids living on the streets. Zero options for former workers in a changing economy. The factory's gone. How am I going to retool for the new economy? So much pain. So much confusion. So much aimlessness. How can our hearts not break like Jesus's? Now, on our own, Maidenhead Core cannot ever think that we can meet all the needs of our community. There is no way we're going to be able to meet A to Z. But as we continue our big conversation, we do need to ensure that we are fulfilling God's mission for this place and meeting the needs that God asks us to meet. And as we do so, then the cornerstone of our mission must be our compassion for the confused and the aimless crowd. Christ's compassion must be seen and felt in all the mission that we do. We're called to offer hope and encouragement. We must go to them. We must care for them. We must pray for them. And as we continue through this big conversation, I know in my gut that opportunity knocks for us. The Lord of the harvest wants and needs our cooperation. We must be willing to say individually and as a core family, "Here I am, send me." We must be prepared to go and serve with breaking hearts that are filled with God's compassion. There are people hurting in the world out there, and they need you, and they need me, and they need Christ. And if we're not willing for our hearts to break for those people, if we're not willing to sacrifice and go to them and give them hope and encouragement and show Christ's love to them, then they may well go away without Christ. And that's the worst thing that we can do for anyone. So we're going to sing that song together. It's 935 in the songbook. And if you're willing to join or to continue to be a part of the mission, if you're willing to serve the confused and the aimless crowd in any way you can, then as we sing, as a particular line in the 3 verses of this song pulls on your heartstrings, I invite you just to stand wherever you are and say, "Yes, here I am. Send me. This is what my heart breaks for this morning." Let's sing these 3 verses together. Thank you. It's more than my job's worth to disagree with the general very often. But I'm going to suggest that if we close our eyes, they won't go away. Because we've imagined them in our mind's eye this morning. And if God has really broken your heart for these people this morning, then even when you close your eyes, they'll still be there. They'll still be needing you and needing me, and most of all, needing Christ. I wonder if we could sing that fourth verse once more. Ask God to break your hearts for these people and to find ways of serving them in the days to come. Let's sing the last verse.
If you would like to subscribe to Battle Ready Sermons wherever you choose to listen to podcasts, or if you'd like to receive them direct to your inbox, head to www.equippinghispeople.com/sermons and follow the instructions.